this, we're in October. It should be, what, in the 40s? I think they said.
Yes, and it's now 71 degrees on its way to 82.
Oh, gosh. There's no global warming, though.
No,
just to say that, okay.
We're keeping that. And it's a hot topic today also that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, it is. It's something we need to talk about.
And our guest is going to get into some fascinating perspectives of that maybe some people have not thought about. First of all, our return to civility. Tell older relatives that you're just like them and proud of it. Think about the positive characteristics and traits that you've inherited from your parents and grandparents, and then thank them for the gifts that they've handed down to you. Now, we're not talking about monetary kinds of gifts. We're talking about some, excellent traits and characteristics of living and how to behave.
Amen, brother. There are cultures I know that they like to have different generations in their homes. And they'll build like a house in the back for the grandparents or what have you, so they can look after them, but also that influence that the older folks, I guess, I don't want to say that, but the older adults, the wiser ones among us, can bring to the younger generation. I think that helps.
It does help. And especially in our conversation today, our guest is Dr. Benjamin Ginsberg. He's the David Bernstein Professor of Political Science. He's chair of the Hopkins Center for Advanced Government at Johns Hopkins University. Dr. Ginsberg, welcome to St. Louis InTune.
Well, I'm delighted to be on. How are you this morning?
Good, thank you.
I'm glad to hear it's warm there. It's not that warm here.
And where is it not so warm?
I'm in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. I'm in Potomac, Maryland.
Oh, okay.
It's I think when I walked the dog this morning, it was 30 degrees.
Oh, my gosh.
Wow.
It's warming up a little now, but I've always been a big fan of global warming. I want to be warmer.
the new Florida and the new Arizona.
Well, I was a professor at Cornell for many years in Ithaca, New York. And people, in Ithaca, we had air conditioning, but we had never in 20 years did we turn it on. It never got warm enough.
I'll be darned. Wow.
There was no need.
About global warming. What is this?
Yeah.
I'm Doctor. I'm kind of with you too. I kind of like the warmer weather, but I don't know if it's having a good effect on us. But I do like it.
Yeah,
hard to say.
This the new book that you wrote this year, actually kind of last year, and published this year, and you went back and actually pulled it off the press. It sounded like, and wrote a little forward preface. Is the New American Anti-Semitism, the left, the right, and the Jews. And you were very prophetic, which is unfortunate. I love prophets that can predict things that are in a positive manner for our society and culture. But your prediction was one that it was almost like self-fulfilling. And I want to get into that and explain that a little bit. Explain the title and what is the new American anti-Semitism as opposed to the old. I saw an interview where somebody asked you that question, and it's like, was there an old anti-American Semitism? And you go into this.
Oh yeah, there was just anti-Semitism on and off in the United States for quite some time. At the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, there was very, very severe anti-Semitism in the United States. The imposition of Jewish quotas, colleges and universities. Jews were excluded from some of the professions, from medical schools. But that all ended during the time of the New Deal, and a lot of younger Jewish people were shocked to discover that some folks out there didn't like them. But what's new about anti-Semitism today is that traditionally we associate anti-Semitism with the political right. Obviously the Nazis. And for the most part, anti-Semitism in the United States has been associated with forces on the political right. But what's new is that the groups running around college campuses claiming to be anti-Zionists are on the political left. It's not only Middle Eastern students, but it's students from a variety of left liberal groups. who have joined together to demand an end to the Gaza war, to demand an end to Israel. And you know, when they claim to be anti-Zionist, that's silly. They're anti-Semites. There's no difference between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. Maybe philosophically there's a difference, but in the real political world, there's no difference whatsoever. So we've seen a tremendous upsurge of anti-Semitism in the United States. It's come from the political left, and you know that's what's new about it. And American Jews, in particular, find this hard to wrap their heads around. They equate anti-Semitism with Nazis, and it's hard for them to believe that their former friends and among Democratic progressives are the ones who are at the base of anti-Semitism today.
Yeah,
I find it really disturbing that anyone is asking or calling for the end of Israel. That to me is just I can't even wrap my head around that. Where they
you know, yeah, this has a bit of history, like everything else. So you gotta, you know, a little bit of the history here. When Israel was founded in the late 1940s, it was a little socialist state. It was armed by, you know, among others, the Soviet Union, and left-wing politicians in America and Europe used to Israel for photo ops. They like to be shown sitting on a tractor at a kibbutz. That showed they were, you know, they were in tune with the people. I think somewhere in the archives there's a picture of Bernie Sanders sitting on a tractor at a kibbutz, pretending to be driving the tractor. So Israel was very popular on the political left. But this changed for two reasons. First was the 1967 Israel-Arab War, when Israel defeated the armies of all the Arab states in a quick war. Israel emerged victorious, and this little tiny, weak socialist state turned out to be a regional power. A lot of people took notice. You know, the evangelical Protestants saw this as the fulfillment of biblical prophecy. You know, the return of the Jews to the holy places, they thought predicted the second coming. So today, the so-called Christian Zionists, evangelicals, are among Israel's strongest supporters. But also the American national security establishment took note. Because, you know, to the United States, the major goal of policy in the Middle East has been privileged access to the Saudi and Gulf state oil fields. That's what we have been worried about. And the United States has opposed everybody who has tried to undermine our access to Middle Eastern oil, going all the way back to Gamal Abdel Nasser's Egypt and more recently the Iranians, of course. So to American policymakers, Israel looked like a very, potentially a very useful ally, a very useful proxy, because the Israelis turned out to be very adept in war making. So the United States began to arm Israel. So instead of Soviet bloc and some French arms, you know, Israel began to field first-rank American weapons, which is the case today. Well, this had the effect of souring left-wing politicians on Israel. Instead of being a nice place where you could ride the tractor at the kibbutz, Israel turned out to be an ally of what they saw as American imperialism. That was one factor. A second was migration. Millions of Muslims from Middle Eastern countries began emigrating first to Europe and then subsequently smaller numbers to the United States. When these Muslims arrived in Europe, socialist parties of the left, saw possible new socialist voters. They were poor, downtrodden, what have you, so they tried to recruit them. Well, it turned out that Muslim immigrants didn't have much in common with European socialists. The Muslim immigrants had never heard of Karl Marx, weren't interested in many of the views espoused by the European left. However, it turned out there was one thing that they could agree on. The Muslims hated Israel. European socialists didn't like Israel. So that became the unifying factor, and European socialists began to ally with Muslims in opposition to Israel. So that's the origin of European anti-Semitism. A similar process began in the United States with one added factor, and that is that Muslim student groups became active on American college campuses. For example, Students for Justice in Palestine. We saw in the news just today that SJP was banned at Brown University for anti-Semitic activities. Well, Muslim student groups integrated themselves into the progressive ecosystem of a number of American college campuses. On most American campuses, there are alliances of various left liberal groups, some espousing racial goals, some dealing with gender issues, some offended by climate change, you name it. And they all band together under a logic that is called intersectionality. Now, listeners who are not familiar with the idea of intersectionality, listen up, because this is politically a very important concept. It's the idea that all oppressed groups, whatever their particular goals might be, need to band together to fight oppression. So even if I don't really like your goal that much, it doesn't matter, I need to support you. So Muslim student groups, Students for Justice in Palestine in particular, became part of the progressive intersectional ecosystem on American college and university campuses. And this is what turned left-wing campus politics against Israel, and not too much after that against Jews more generally. This is what, intersectionality is why you get these peculiar alliances. Like, my favorite was Queers for Palestine. Now, that's ridiculous. In most of the Muslim Middle East, gay people are more likely than not to be murdered. So Queers for Palestine might seem to be advocating for their own destruction, but they don't quite get it. They just advocate for their friends on the left. So this is campus politics today, and this is where the epicenter of anti-Semitic activity is in the United States today. Progressive groups associated with college campuses. And, college campuses in many parts of the country have become very uncomfortable for Jewish students, for Jewish faculty who are not willing to, like in Mao's China, you have to up and confess your sins. Those who aren't willing to wear a dunce cap and say, I am not a Zionist. And even some of those are subjected to censure. So this is how what once was a right-wing ideology has now become a left-wing ideology. It has affected the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, and unfortunately is growing in importance in the United States today.
We are talking to Dr. Benjamin Ginsberg. He is the David Bernstein Professor of Political Science and the chair of the Hopkins Center for Advanced Government Studies in Washington, D.C. His research interests include American politics, Jewish history, higher education policy, and the societal impact of war and violence. He's the author and co-author or editor of 30 books, and his college text, We the People, now in its 14th edition, has been the nation's most frequently used American government text for the past 3 decades. And he's going to be talking Thursday, November 7th at 1 p.m. at the St. Louis Kaplan Feldman Holocaust Museum as part of the Arthur Gale series, talking about his book. And, Dr. Ginsburg, as you were talking about that, it seemed to me that individuals are either deliberately indifferent and maybe deliberately naive, or they just haven't read their history or haven't done their research and haven't been informed. Because generally, when I hear things like you've just said, where the LGBTQ plus group is for Palestine, is Queers for Palestine is saying that they support that, but they really don't understand that they'd be dead if they were in Palestine. So is this a deliberate thing, or is this a something that is just they're totally ignorant about what's going on with the other side?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question, and let me give you two answers. One is that people tend to filter information through their preconceptions, right? So if you're a Democrat, you tend to filter out anything negative about the Democrats. If you're a MAGA Republican, you tend to sort of turn off your brain if anyone says anything negative about Trump. So, I have a friend who's a professor at Hopkins, he's Persian, and he said he was walking past at George Washington University in the spring, and he saw Queers for Palestine, and he stopped, and he said, I'm from that part of the world, and I can tell you that you would not be welcome in Palestine. They would probably kill you. So the person to whom he was speaking said, oh, no, that can't be true. So the person to whom he was speaking didn't want to hear anything that was inconsistent with what she believed. The second part of the answer is that American students aren't really taught any history. Our secondary school system hardly teaches any history. I always joke with my college students that the only difference they know between World War I and World War II is they know which came first because they're numbered. Otherwise, they wouldn't know anything about them.
Oh, no.
We should number all the wars.
Oh, gosh.
And it's not their fault. They're smart kids. But no one has ever taught them anything.
Yeah,
if you read a high school history text, you'd come away very confused by it. So when you put these two things together, and here's the third thing to think about. When years ago when I was in school, the pedagogical model they used was something called Bloom's Pyramid, where you started with basic facts and then you worked your way up the steps of the pyramid to critical thinking. Now they've inverted it. They start with critical thinking. I guess it's easier to think critically if you don't know anything. There's nothing to interfere with your critical thinking. But I found that a lot of people think that anything they think with their feelings. Mm-hmm. I see this in class. A kid will raise his hand and say, well, I feel that. And I always say, no, I don't care what you feel. Do you know anything? But kids are taught to, that their feelings need to be validated. And truth emerges from feelings. Remember when we saw on TV, I call them the Three Stooges, the former president of Harvard, the former president of Penn, and the president of MIT were trying to explain whether it was okay to run around their campuses calling for the murder of the Jews, whether that conflicted with the speech codes. So one of the Three Stooges, the former president of Harvard, kept on referring to her truth. She said, it's not my truth, as though she had a truth that was different from other truths. She was someone who was leading with her feelings. If she felt it, truth followed from it. So we have a lot of confused kids out there. They don't know much. They're They're taught that their feelings need to be validated, and then they view everything through the lens of their preconceptions. It's hard to argue them out of it, and that's why you get these oddities. I also want to say a little bit about the student encampments of last spring. All these kids out there camping out. What was that all about? I was on the phone one time with a reporter from Austria, and she said to me, she said, "You Americans are so naive. You don't understand what's going on there." She said, "We understand. What this is Hitler Youth Camp. You put these naive kids into these encampments where it's kind of romantic, a little bit of revolution in the air. And in the tent with them is a more seasoned activist who teaches them. So they knowing nothing, being totally naive, and they come out having learned from some seasoned activist the importance of the work that they're doing. That's what Hitler Youth Camp was all about. And that's what was going on in those encampments. We all thought they were silly and funny, but they weren't. That was a very serious business, and university administrators who didn't move against them were making a big mistake.
I agree with that analysis of that it's just like an open mind when you've inverted Bloom's taxonomy and you're beginning with critical thinking. When I don't have anything to think about anyway, I can just take whatever is dished my way and run with that. And
that's right.
The answer that you mentioned about one of the Harvard president about this is my truth or that's not my truth, is that there are some absolutes in the world. And it's unfortunate that we've gotten to the point in some cultural and what I should say societal kinds of the disagreements that we totally ignore facts and things going on. And the reason I say that is because your first chapter is 3 questions to ask anti-Semites. And I thought that was a great way to start the book, because you were like, okay, you're confronted with someone like this. Here are some questions to ask them. And what would those questions be again?
Right.
Well, I don't have it in front of me, and I often don't remember exactly what I wrote. But I know one of the questions had to do with trying to explain why Israel, why particularly vilify Israel.
Great question. That's a great question. It's kind of been swirling in my head.
And the Israel is hardly perfect. No state is perfect. Governments all do bad things. But if you compare Israel to the other states of the Middle East, Israel comes out looking pretty good. People say Israel is an ethno-state, but most of the states in the world are ethno-states, and certainly all of the states of the Middle East are ethno-states. If you are in a Middle Eastern state and you're a non-Muslim, if you're even allowed to be there, you're a second-class citizen. Israel is accused of the crime of settler colonialism. These Jewish settlers came in and stole the land of Arab people. But you know what? Every place in the world is guilty of settler colonialism.
Yep.
Now, certainly the United States, but but the Europeans who like to accuse the United States of being settler colonists, well, they're settler colonists too.
Right.
The French, the Germans, they stole the land from the Romans, and the Romans had stolen the land from previous groups. That's the way of the world. It's unfortunate, but every square inch of territory on the face of the earth used to belong to somebody else. And so, the Israelis aren't especially guilty of this. And as to the use of brutality, well, come on, in a world that contains Iran, North Korea, if your goal is to mitigate governmental brutality, start an anti-North Korean movement.
There you are.
So why pick on Israel in particular? And to me, it has something to do with hatred of Jews. It also has to do with anti-Americanism. The Iranians have this cute label: Israel is the little Satan, and America is the great Satan. A lot of anti-Israel agitation is also anti-American. When they talk about settler colonialism, they mean America as much as they do Israel. When they talk about imperialism, they mean America. So, Americans need to understand that the groups running around chanting about Israel without missing a beat will chant about America and burn an American flag too.
We're going to take a quick break and we're going to come right back. We're talking to Dr. Benjamin Ginsberg about his book, The New American Anti-Semitism. This is Arnold Stricker with Mark Langston of St. Louis InTune. We'll be right back. The United States has a strong tradition of welcoming newcomers and refugees. The Welcome Corps is a new service opportunity for Americans inspired to welcome those seeking freedom and safety and in turn help strengthen their own communities. Welcome Corps is a public-private partnership that is inspired by what Americans represent to so many around the world, a beacon of hope and refuge. All it takes is a helping hand. Are you ready to learn more? Contact the International Institute of St. Louis at info@iistl.org or call 314-773-9090. That's info@iistl.org or call 314-773-9090. This is Arnold Stricker of St. Louis InTune on behalf of the Dred Scott Heritage Foundation. In 1857, the Dred Scott decision was a major legal event and catalyst that contributed to the Civil War. The decision declared that Dred Scott could not be free because he was not a citizen. The 14th Amendment, also called the Dred Scott Amendment, granted citizenship to all born or naturalized here in our country and was intended to overturn the U.S. Supreme Court decision on July 9, 1868. The Dred Scott Heritage Foundation is requesting a commemorative stamp to be issued from the U.S. Postal Service to recognize and remember the heritage of this amendment by issuing a stamp with the likeness of the man Dred Scott. But we need your support and the support of thousands of people who would like to see this happen. To achieve this goal, we ask you to download, sign, and share the one-page petition with others. To find the petition, please go to dredscottlives.org and click on the Dred Scott Petition Drive on the right side of the page. On behalf of the Dred Scott Heritage Foundation, this has been Arnold Stricker of St. Louis InTune. Welcome back to St. Louis InTune. This is Arnold Stricker with Mark Langston. We're talking to Dr. Benjamin Ginsberg from Johns Hopkins University. He's going to participate in the Arthur Gale series, The New American Anti-Semitism, The Left, the Right, and the Jews, and that's Thursday, November 7th at 1 p.m. at the Kaplan-Feldman Holocaust Museum. You can go to showpass.com or go to jcstl.org. I believe that's the website. We'll post that in the podcast show notes. Dr. Ginsberg, we've kind of, it's almost like a little dreary that where we kind of left things, but there is something that you do offer that I think many Jews would find this new alliance very alarming and shocking. And that new alliance is with evangelical Christians. Would you elaborate on that a little bit, please?
Yeah. Many Jews are so tied to the Democratic Party and to progressive political movements that they won't consider doing anything else. But and as a result, are too quick to refuse to form alliances on the political right. But one conservative group that is very friendly to Jews consists of evangelicals, Christian Zionists. They're staunchly pro-Israel. They're not especially interested in converting Jews. They think when the Messiah comes back, the Jews will all convert anyway, so they don't work very hard on that. I once convinced some friends of ours to attend a conference of Jews and Christian Zionists, and they came back sort of surprised by what a friendly environment it was, and they repeated to us a joke that was told, which is one that is common in those conferences. The a Jewish speaker will say, we Jews and you Christians, we agree on everything, on absolutely everything, except maybe one little thing. And that is that we both agree the Messiah is coming. The thing is, you say he's been here before, so it would be his second visit. We say he's never been here before, so it'd be his first visit. But we don't need to argue about that. We agree the Messiah is coming. So when he comes, we'll ask him, have you been here before or not? And that'll settle the matter. We don't have to fight about it. So
I love it. Good point.
so that's a good point, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
it really
So,
is.
Jews need to think carefully about who their friends are, who their enemies are. The great German Jewish political philosopher Hannah Arendt said that Jews are pretty smart, but they're not very good at politics, and they tend to cling to political alliances long after they've lost their value. And the Jews for nearly a century, they've been Democrats since Franklin Roosevelt brought them over from the Republican Party. They had been Republicans before that, and they've remained Democrats ever since. They need to rethink that. They need to think about who their friends are, who their enemies are. And in my view, Jews find more enemies on the left and more friends on the right at this moment in time. That's not to say there are no right-wing anti-Semites. Of course there are. But the folks running around screaming, death to Israel, death to America for that matter, those aren't right-wingers. Those are left-wingers. The Unite the Right rally in the first year of the Trump administration, they united a couple of hundred people, whereas these anti-Zionist, anti-Israel rallies, anti-Semitic rallies in New York City and other cities in the United States, those have involved thousands of people. And Jews need to be very much aware of where their enemies are right now. Jews also need to be aware of the fact that their kids don't know much about Jewish history. I've had kids in my classes who went to Jewish day school, and they knew Jewish ritual, but they didn't know anything about Jewish history. They were what I would call, Shabbos Jews, Sabbath Jews. They knew ritual over national identification. And I think Jewish parents need to be very careful to make sure that their kids know something about Jewish history, and especially modern Jewish history. It's not true that the Jews have no rights to the land of Israel. That's ridiculous. All of the antiquities there are Jewish. The Jews were there long before other claimants today. Jews have more rights to Israel than anyone else, and yet even Jewish kids aren't taught. They think some European Jews came over after World War II and threw out the legitimate owners of the land. That's just not true. It's historically inaccurate, and that contributes to this what I consider another form of craziness. I think Queers for Palestine is one form of craziness, and it's the anti-Zionist Jews. Those are folks who have no idea where their interests are, where their loyalties should be, and if their friends were successful, things wouldn't go well for them either. There's an old saying in Yiddish, "Es wär's nicht helfen." It wouldn't help them if their friends won. Their friends don't like them. I remember one time after class when they were having a discussion about Israel and the Arab world and whatnot, and liberal Jewish students, some of them, turned out to be quite anti-Israel. And as I was walking across the quad, a Muslim student came over to me and he said, "Well, this is an embarrassing question. I hope you don't take it the wrong way." But I couldn't understand what those liberal Jewish students were talking about. He said, "Don't they know we want to kill them all?" And I said, no, they don't see the world that way. They don't understand. They don't know the history. And he just shook his head and walked away. So that's something that Jewish, various, Jewish anti-Zionist groups, members of those groups, should think about.
That is an excellent point, which really reveals the title, The New American Anti-Semitism, the Left, the Right, and the Jews. Dr. Benjamin Ginsberg is the author. He's been our guest, and he's going to be speaking at the Arthur Gale series, The New American Anti-Semitism, the Left, the Right, the Jews, and that's Thursday, November 7th at 1 p.m. at the Kaplan-Feldman Holocaust Museum. jccstl.com to get more information, jccstl.com. Dr. Ginsberg, you have 30 seconds to talk to someone, or let me give you more time. Let me give you 60 seconds where somebody brings up they're just not knowledgeable, and maybe they're Jewish, and everything that you've just said makes sense to Mark and myself. I've read the book. It's very enlightening, and I really encourage everybody to get a copy of the book and read it. But you have someone just like that Arab student that you were talking to who just shook his head and you can't believe. But you're going to talk to that Jewish student now. What do you tell them?
I tell them, do not be. There's a phrase in Russian, "Polezhnie duraki." You know that? Have you ever heard that? "Polezhnie duraki."
I've not.
No.
But that's what the Soviets used to call their sympathizers in the West. It means useful idiots.
You mean say that again? It means what?
Useful idiots.
Wow.
So they regarded their Western sympathizers, their comrades in the United States and in Europe, as idiots. They were useful idiots because they were advocates that would result in their own destruction. So that's what I tell Jewish students to be aware of. Don't be useful idiots for the Iranians, for the Palestinians, and for other anti-Semitic groups. Remember who you are.
Great advice. Thank you, sir. I greatly appreciate your time today. We look forward to you being at the series on November the 7th at 1 p.m. Thank you again for your time, Dr. Ginsberg.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doctor.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Wow.
Mark, it's really an important, not a concept, but it's an important thought process that he goes into in the book. And I want to read the chapter titles because it's very important. First, before I read that, the last part of his preface says this: as an author, I'm usually pleased when events prove my points. In this case, however, I'm sorry to have been right. He had written the book prior to October 7th of last year, 2023. It was going to press. He told the publisher, wait, I need to write something related to that. And that's, he wrote more than that, but that's kind of what he wrote as it relates to that. And it's, he goes into a really good history. The chapter titles are this: Anti-Semitism Today, 3 Questions to Ask Anti-Semites, How Anti-Semitism Became a Progressive Ideology, Why the Jews Persist, The Benefits of Philo-Semitism and Costs of Anti-Semitism, Genesis 12:3, The Myth of American Exceptionalism, Why Are the Jews Still Democrats, and New Alliances, Jews and the Christian Zionists. And then he gives some final thoughts on anti-Semitism today, what's good for the Jews. It's a great book, a lot of references in the back. He has done his research. He's written 30 books. He's a noted professor and speaker on a variety of things. So if you're interested in why anti-Semitism is becoming what I would say a little bit more prolific in our country, especially on college campuses, a great book to get. If you're just kind of curious about the whole concept of what's going on, it's a really essential kind of reading to watch how these cycles occur over the course of history. And he kind of traces some of those things throughout history and throughout different countries. And it's very fascinating.
And I wish people would pick it up and look at it and read it. I think he said it, maybe you said it earlier in the interview, that MAGA folks, they just think MAGA, they shut out any other conversations. The same with the left, the liberals, they cut out any other discussion that might enlighten them and make them smarter to these issues. So my I would suggest that people try to open up a little bit and listen to the other side. Take a moment, because people do they go, I'm a staunch Democrat and I don't want to hear anything that the Republicans have to say,
Right.
and vice versa for the Republicans. They do the same thing.
Well, yeah.
And I don't understand how anyone can be sympathetic towards a state that is terroristic, like Iran is, and the Palestinians can be. I mean, there are kind people, and even Israel. They take things a little too far, I think, too. But I don't know how you can be sympathetic to those kind of things.
Yeah, his point about there's no anti-North Korea group, or
right,
and
right.
things like that. Other countries
Good
that are
point.
just totalitarian and
Right.
Totally destroying their people. And if you look through the course of history, he tracks the old Soviet Union. He talks about Germany and all these influences that let's just kind of accept this in. To your point, you're exactly right. We tend to listen in and think in silos. We don't, I always think about, and this is typical though, I think of universities where, and as you drive through the countryside, folks, and you look at, like, especially Illinois or Iowa, and there are silos where grain is loaded in. Sometimes you'll see a track from one silo to another. In education and in higher ed and things like that, even in business, they're still silos. They don't connect to each other. They might be doing the same kind of research, but they're not talking to each other. So my point is this: don't be in a silo where that if you're a MAGA person, all you listen to is Fox News.
Right.
Pull up MSNBC, pull up CNN.
Right.
If you're somebody who's a progressive, who's just, I'm strictly an MSNBC person, a CNN, pull up Fox News.
Right.
As much as these things might grate on you, you may learn and get a perspective of what that side is actually thinking. And honestly, the people who do those broadcasts, there are very few what I would call journalists anymore who are doing the news. And most of those people are on independent they're doing their own stuff now. But it's getting the information and balancing it out. And I think we've become so hyper emotional in our political culture that we don't have the opportunity to engage the thing that's inside our skull.
Bravo, Arnold. We should get the applause going here, because you're right. I think there's a lot to be said about, if you're a Fox News person, listen to MSNBC,
right,
and vice versa. I do that. I go and I go,
too.
Oh my gosh, I'm going to listen to this channel and I know what's going to be there. But you know what? It is enlightening. It's good to see how they're looking at things, how they're seeing things through the prism or whatever. But it's a fascinating learning experience to go to the other side, whatever that other side is, and take a look and see what they're doing.
The other thing I think
what they're saying
with individuals who proclaim to be, how do I say this in a nice, polite way?
It's not going to work.
who proclaim to be journalists, is that a real journalist will ask probing questions. A real journalist will pin somebody down and say, well, you really didn't answer the question, and they'll ask it again because they want an answer. And many politicians and people who are running for office, and I'm thinking of anyone in particular now, they will give a what I would call a gray answer, or it's a fluid answer. In other words, it could be this, or it could be this, or it could be this, it could be this. Whatever the way the wind's blowing that day, that's what that answer could be. And one of the reasons is to get elected. But people don't elect people who are blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind.
Right.
No, the answer is answer the question. Right. So I know where you stand on something, because if you don't stand for something, you fall for anything. How about that one, Mark?
I like that.
That's not Arnold.
No,
I'm just repeating that.
Yeah, that's good. Now, Dr. Ginsburg also said that a lot of the students now deal with things based on their feelings.
Yes.
So I wanted to kind of investigate that a little bit with him, because there's an old saying too that says your head doesn't hear it until your heart listens to it, or something like that. And I'm not sure. Maybe we need a little more head thinking than feeling thinking.
Mhm.
And don't forget the heart, though. But so I think there's three. To me, there's three. There's feelings, there's the heart, and then there's the head. And I think all of them, they need to all work together, kind of. But he says a lot of folks are doing the feeling thing,
They do.
and I don't think they're thinking that through. And maybe they're not feeling it in their heart before they feel it in their head. I don't know.
And these two things, 18 inches apart,
Right.
really work together. They work extremely well together.
If you allow it to.
Yes, yes,
If
but you
allow
have
it.
to have the information, and you have to want to find. I'm wondering whether some people just don't want to find out the information, because then they would have to make a decision,
Oh, heaven
and
forbid.
then they may lose a group of friends or whatever going on.
Right.
But it's kind of interesting that after 9/11, there was a lot of what he is referred to in the book, and what others refer to as Islamophobia. And we're going to get those Arabs, we're going to get those Islams, we're going to get those folks that are believing in that, and that kind of has died down. And now it's like, let's go after the Jews. Oh, look what Israel's doing. And I'm not saying that bombarding Gaza, and here's the other things. Are you going to believe Hamas,
Right.
as it relates to the number of people killed, or are you going to believe Israel?
Right.
Because those numbers are completely different.
Way
Okay, so
different.
who do you believe, folks?
Right.
Who do you believe? And I would say this, and I guess I'm going to take a side here. Who attacked whom? And read and do your history. Again, back to I'm going on my feelings.
Mhm.
And gee, if I'm watching on Twitter, usually last called Twitter, now called X, if I'm my feed is giving me stuff coming from Gaza done by some Hamas folks, and I'm not listening to the other side, what am I going to believe?
Right.
Where are we there?
I know.
It's
a tough, complicated issue, and
and when does a country stop attacking another group that's been attacked for over X period of time?
And I advocate many times, like, they should just stop. I think Israel's done enough. I think they've pretty much pushed them away. And then I hear from Hamas, oh, we're not stopping. We're going to come back and kill you.
Right.
And we don't care. It's like, how do you rationalize we're not going to stop until it's over?
How do you rationalize in their constitution this destruction of Israel?
I don't see that's where it all goes sideways with me.
And it's not a constitution of a country. It's a constitution of a group who are ruling over people.
Correct.
Who really don't care for that group ruling over them.
And they all go, well, they can get rid of them. No, it's not that easy.
Same thing with Hezbollah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Not that easy.
It reminded me of
I wish it were that easy.
Yes, it reminds me of the recess playground bully who will push people around on the playground, and finally somebody has had enough, and kaboom.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, don't do that, knock it off, take a little bit, you take a little bit, you get told by the teacher, don't do that, we don't do, and finally the bully pushes the kid the wrong direction. The kid finally retaliates back and hauls off and belts the kid.
Wow.
And it's like, well, you could see that one coming,
Yeah.
because the kid didn't know when to stop.
Right.
So
Right.
I don't know.
There's many examples, I'm afraid, of that,
Yeah.
where people finally stand up to the bully, and then you're not so popular because you're standing up to the bully. It's like, what are you doing?
Right,
It's like,
right.
I'm standing up to
Oh,
a
you
bully.
hurt him.
I know. It's like, well, yeah, I know. It's like, what about the 10 things he did? Or
Right,
she,
right.
Yeah,
Right.
I did one. They did 20.
I guess the whole conversation we're having today, Mark, is really encouraging people, and this is what the show's about. And you may disagree, folks, with what we're saying, what has been said, who we have on the show. And I would say this, it's to help you think. And if it spurred you to do some extra thinking or disagree, well, tell me why you disagree with points, not like I disagree with you, or not like, well, that's wrong, or you haven't done your homework, or whatever. I'm not fully, I'm not the end all on this stuff. We're just presenting the information.
Right.
And it's important. The St. Louis Jewish Book Festival has some folks coming in that are really good. He's one of them. And that's one reason I wanted to have him on. We had somebody on last week just like that, who was talking about some similar topics. So check things out. I want to encourage you to check out the St. Louis Jewish Book Festival, jccstl.com. Look for that.
Okay. That's good stuff. It's all good stuff.
It is.
I know. It's heavy, but needed.
Yes. A lot of people don't like to have heavy conversations.
Yeah, but it's you gotta talk about this stuff, folks, once in a while.
Yeah.
You gotta bring it out
You really do.
into the daylight. Nothing wrong with bringing things to the daylight.
No. Because they're eventually going to come out.
I know they are. You've been warned.
Yeah, exactly.
You have been warned.
So do you have some days of the day, Mark?
Oh, you know what? I didn't even think about that, but I bet I could find some.
Well,
but,
you do that. I'm going to read our word for the day, which we haven't done for a long time.
wait, what? Okay, go ahead.
I do have a good word.
Aw.
I need to get to my page about that.
It is National Cat Day, by the way.
National Cat Day?
Cat Day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And National Internet Day.
Mm.
National Hermit Day.
Ooh.
I know.
My cat's a hermit on the internet.
Uh-huh. Yep. Uh-huh. National Oatmeal Day. Do you like oatmeal?
I do.
National Prescription Drug Take Back Day.
Oh, it's that.
You're not
tippy.
supposed to like flush that stuff down the toilet.
No. It goes into the water system. Everybody gets high.
I know. Oh, golly. I know. Holy smokes. Oh, Bob Ross's birthday is today.
Oh.
Do you like Bob Ross?
It's,
I'm a big fan of Bob Ross now. I guess it's to each his own. Huh?
I saw something that I don't know if it's true or not. It's one of those X, formerly Twitter things where they take his first picture and they take all his pictures and go all the way through to the end. And he's just showing some big scene.
Mm. Oh, nah. I don't believe that either.
No.
National Checklist Day. Do you have a checklist? Do you ever go by a checklist?
I do sometimes.
I should all the time. Let me see. Just a couple more. Let's see. Mischief Night is coming up tomorrow night. National Candy Corn Day will be tomorrow.
Oh, candy corn.
And let's see. National Speak Up for Service Day and National, this goes along with the Cat Day. This will be my last. National Treat Your Pet Day. Give your pet a treat.
Oh, do that very often each day.
Do you? Get them to shut up.
Both of them. Yeah, exactly.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Exactly.
Sorry.
Intransigent. Intransigent. A refusal to compromise or to abandon an often extreme position or attitude. He has an uncompromising he was uncompromising, intransigent in their he was intransigent in their opposition, an intransigent attitude. In other words, you've got this extreme position and you refuse to compromise.
So I could say you're being very intransigent today to somebody that just doesn't want to compromise.
Right. Like
Quit
Hamas
being intransigent.
or Hezbollah.
That'd stop them in their tracks. You intransigent.
You intransigent.
Intransigent. That's a tough word to say.
It is.
Intransigent.
It is a tough one.
All right.
All right. I do have some happiness here for our folks.
No.
Matter of fact, today I told my boss I was going to the bathroom, but I didn't say which one. Now I'm at home. Then there's a sign outside of a gym. It says, tired of being fat and ugly? Just be ugly. 24 Fitness. We squint at the sun because it is bright. We squint at people because they are not.
I saw a couple of those on the way to work. Okay.
And this is true. We've done these Mondegreens before. Right. So this is a and I really have to check this out. It says, I don't have time to Google lyrics. I sing what I hear. Dancing Queen, young and sweet, only 7 teeth.
Yeah. We got to do those Montegreens again.
Yes.
That was a fun show.
Did you know New York City has enough restaurants for one person to eat at a new spot every night for 22.7 years without repeating a visit?
Wow. Thank you, New York, New York.
Then there's the dad and the teen daughter. They were sitting down to watch the baseball game, and the dad says, you want to watch the baseball game with me? And she says, no, I don't like baseball. He said, well, I didn't like The Little Mermaid, but I watched it 1,387 times. Now go get your hat and jersey on.
Boy, have I been there.
And here's some marriage advice. Your husband is the best person to tell your secrets to. He won't tell anyone because he isn't even listening.
What'd you say?
Yes. And Alaska is so vast and sparsely populated that its population density is roughly equivalent to having 29 people living in Manhattan.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's crazy.
That is totally crazy.
That's crazy.
There's a lot of crazy going on here in this show.
Now, let's see here. An apple a day keeps anyone away if you throw it hard enough.
Thank you very much.
I think my dog always follows me to the bathroom because I always follow him outside, and he thinks that's the way it works.
That's scary. Just saying. Just saying.
Yeah. Let's see here. Here's a good one.
We're waiting now.
We're waiting. Yes, we are waiting, Arnold. Where did that joke go? Here it is. Okay. Today, my son asked me for whiteout to put over the test questions that he didn't know the answers to. I said, yeah, the teacher won't notice that at all, son.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
That's not right.
To avoid conversations at work, always walk with a purpose and a toilet plunger.
That's yeah, all right is right.
And folks, we'll leave you with this, that once you understand why the pizza is made round, packed in a square box, and eaten as a triangle, then you will understand women.
Wow. I love that one. Okay. That works out pretty good.
Well, that's all for this show. We thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, you can listen to additional shows at stlintune.com. Consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, or your preferred podcast platform. Your feedback helps us reach more listeners and continue to grow. I want to thank Bob Berthasell for our theme music, our guest, Dr. Benjamin Ginsberg, and co-host Mark Langston. We thank you, folks, for being a part of our community of curious minds. St. Louis in Tune is a production of Motif Media Group and the U.S. Radio Network. Remember to keep seeking, keep learning, walk worthy, and let your light shine. For St. Louis in Tune, I'm Arnold Stricker.